Welcome to another session of the Milk Bank Fireside Chats. My name is Lena Gregory. I'm on the donor relations team here at Mother's Milk Bank, program of Rocky Mountain Children's Health Foundation, and I am here today with Carrie, who is one of our amazing milk donors, to just chat a little bit about the milk donation process and kind of how that went. Welcome, Carrie. It's so good to see you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So we're just going to start with that big question, like what inspired you to donate your milk? What brought you to the place that you said, I've got this extra milk in my freezer and this is what I want to do?
Yeah, I think kind of two pieces to it. So the first piece for me was I was making a little bit more than I needed in order to store for my baby. And I had always been under the impression that in order to be a milk donor, you had to be like a super producer, right? And so when I started making a little bit more than I needed and our freezer was starting to get full, and I thought to myself, well, there's gotta be a way to donate this. And so I started doing some research. I think on the other side of that, I was a NICU baby. I was born at 29 and a half weeks, way back in the 90s. And, a lot of the NICU babies around me really needed that same kind of support. And so it just felt like a really good way to go full circle and give something back to that community. That was really personal and that was something that matters to every single family.
I love that full circle story. We get so many different variations on that theme of, but I love I love when it was the donor who was the NICU baby who was in that situation. It's just a beautiful thing, and it speaks to how long milk banking has been around. We've been helping babies for dozens of years, for decades now. And I like too that you just had a little bit of an oversupply. We, as a point of kind of requirements for donors, we ask donors to commit to donating 100 to 150 ounces of milk to us, which is about like a grocery bag full of milk if you're still in a state that uses plastic grocery bags. So it's not a ton of milk, but we want you to have excess in excess of what your baby needs. So tell me a little bit about the screening process. I know the screening process from my perspective, and we try and make it try and have as few speed bumps as possible for the donors and make it as smooth as possible. But tell me a little bit about how that experience was from the other side.
Yeah, I mean, it was super simple. When I first went onto the website, there was a lot of information about kind of the basics of it. And so going into that first conversation, I wasn't going in totally blind. And during that first conversation, there was a lot of back and forth about the expectations and kind of what was expected on your end and what I could provide on my end. You guys made it really clear what kind of things were okay and what kind of things we needed to be really careful about. I know hygiene was a really big one for you guys, but then you walked us through how to do that. And I think, especially for somebody who was a brand new mom, that was helpful for me too, because there were a couple aha moments in that conversation of like, oh, that's something I should be doing for my own baby that maybe I haven't been doing, right, exactly on the T,
Sure.
And so that I think having all that information up front was really great. And after that first conversation, and we kind of checked off all the boxes and said, yes, my milk is gonna be a good fit for you guys and healthy enough. I have a little bit of an oversupply. And they said, I think it was about 2 weeks, they said they're gonna finish all of the application pieces and then they would let me know. And they said that it would be, after that 2 weeks I could start dropping off. But if I wanted to start like today to start packaging up any milk that I was producing that was extra that I wanted to start donating, I could do that. And so I think the next day I started making sure that, the bags were labeled properly and that I had it all, the hygiene was really up to par and I was freezing when I should freeze them. And after that, it was really simple. And I just saved up, I think the first time I donated, I had just saved up like 60 ounces or something like that in my fridge. And it took over a month, and that's okay. And after I had all of that saved up, I, took a car ride down here and dropped it off, and it was really super simple, and then I just did it again.
Good. I love that. We're trying to make it as simple as possible for donors, and again, trying to make it as smooth as possible. And it can be intimidating to feel like you have to have this huge oversupply of milk, and it's amazing how quickly that little bit of milk adds up. Just 2 or 3 ounces of extra a day that your baby isn't using can add up to a really significant amount of milk over time. And you can have that little stash, that little emergency stash in your freezer for if you need a bottle, if you spend longer out at the grocery store than you had intended or something like that. So we have a balance between both of those kind of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the big research points that somebody at the milk bank told me that just blew my mind was for every ounce of breast milk, it can sustain a micropreemie for a day.
Yes.
I mean, that was like, I've donated like 170 ounces. Like that's like 170 days for micropreemies.
Yep.
It
Yeah,
just blew my mind and just, yeah, it's
Some
just
of
really
those-
cool stat.
Yeah, some of those little babies, they're taking just such tiny amounts of milk every day because they're little, and so many of them are fragile. And sometimes it's even just that little bridge of milk until their own mom's milk is able to be there. So sometimes it's just a couple of ounces that baby needs just to give that parent that extra day, or maybe an extra 2 days of getting pumping and all of those things coordinated, especially if it's a parent that's had maybe a traumatic delivery or some complications on that, and it gives them that assurance that their baby is fed human milk during those first few days. So it's a small thing as far as ounces of milk, but it's such a huge thing for the preemies that we're serving. So that leads me to my next question. How does that feel to you, especially knowing that that's kind of, again, where you started your life? How does that feel knowing that you're helping out those NICU babies and helping out those parents that are I think of those parents that a lot of people haven't even heard of the NICU until their baby ends up there. So how does it feel knowing that you're helping out those parents and that you're there in the background helping them get through those first hard days?
Yeah, I mean, it's super gratifying. The stories that I've heard from my parents about what those first, and we were in the NICU for a couple months, and so hearing the stories of the hardships that you're enduring, the stress that you're having to go through, the amount of time that parents are spending in the NICU, the fact that, as you said, there are a lot of moms that are not able to immediately produce the milk that they need, and that's a stress that nobody should have in that moment. I know on the flip side of that, when my son was born, it took a couple days for my milk to come in, and I had like that panic moment at 10 p.m. when, he was getting really kind of lethargic, and he wouldn't drink, and he didn't want the formula that we had given him, and I wasn't producing milk, and my husband and I were both just kind of falling apart. And I think to know that doesn't have to be every story, because there are places like this that allow for, everybody to just, even get a little bit of extra milk when you need it. And then it's something that, especially if you have a child who needs to be in the NICU, it's just one extra weight off, and it feels really gratifying to know that I can help support those parents, even in a really invisible way, but just it's huge.
Yes. Yeah, and know that it is it's something that means so much to them on the other end. We don't always have the ability to put those two pieces together, because I can't get those two people face to face in a room, but those parents are so grateful that you were there to lift that weight off of their shoulders. So it was just one thing that they didn't have to worry about, where they had a whole laundry list of things that were scary in that moment. So do you have anything else you'd like to add? If you could sum up your experience in just a couple words, or in one word, what would you say your experience was?
I think that the word that I've said a couple times throughout this is just gratifying. It's been a really great experience, and I'm planning on definitely doing it again in the future.
I love that.
So
Well, hopefully we will talk with you about the screening process again another day.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, again, thank you for joining us, and thank you all for watching. We appreciate you taking the time out to watch our videos. If you ever have any questions about milk donation or about anything else at the milk bank, you're welcome to go to our website, rmchildren.org, and then click on the links to go to the milk bank side. And we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much.